Welcome to the second Greater Brisbane update for January 2025, and once again, it's going to be a big one, so let's jump straight into it. The opening of the Queen's Wharf precinct is still fresh in our memories, but this week, speculation's been growing about the possibility of Star Entertainment going into administration. The possibility was already on people's minds when Queen's Wharf opened, but in the new year, it's looking like it may be a very real possibility, and potentially within the next month or so. Star not only runs Star casinos in Brisbane, Sydney and the Gold Coast, as well as the Star Grand Hotel here, but also own a 50% share of the Destination Brisbane Consortium, the group behind the Queen's Wharf development. Star's troubles started with a number of inquiries into Australia's casino industry, with one inquiry finding that Star had allowed organised crime bosses to run gambling operations on their premises that had facilitated money laundering. The organisation was found to be unfit to hold a licence, but given a grace period to turn things around. ASIC has also required Star to set aside $150 million in cash, as they may be required to pay fines as a result of a separate action by AUSTRAC, Australia's money laundering regulator. Profits have been affected by a combination of tightening regulations and people gambling less due to increasing cost of living. And on top of that, they spent a fortune building Queen's Wharf, including the Neville Bonner Bridge, which was funded not by Brisbane City Council, but by the Destination Brisbane Consortium. After having burnt through one $100 million lifeline offered by their lenders, Star last week revealed that it had just $79 million in cash reserves at the end of 2024. And last weekend, their share price dropped to an all-time low of 10.5 cents. Questions are currently being asked about what will happen if Star does go belly up. Queensland State Premier David Crisafulli has said that a bailout is not an option, but that the state government's focus would be on making sure people have jobs, although at this stage there's not been any real details given about how that would be done. Star employs between 8,000 and 9,000 people across its Australian venues. The Brisbane channel will be following this one closely, so stay tuned and subscribed, as there is likely to be some big developments happening over the next few weeks with this story. At least we got a new bridge out of it all. And speaking of new bridges, this week Brisbane City Council announced that the recently opened Kangaroo Point Bridge had exceeded predictions on how many people would cross it each day by over 75%. An average of around 10,800 people have crossed the bridge every day since it was opened. That's made up of around 8,900 pedestrians, 1,200 cyclists, and 660 scooter riders. Stilts, the restaurant on the bridge, along with the Riverside Cafe Mulga Bills, are currently being fitted out. There'll be a post on the channel's community tab when they open. With the city's new bridges and the introduction of 50-cent fares, the demand for various ferry services has changed. In the November update, I shared the proposal to remove some routes and increase the frequency of others, and this week, Brisbane City Council announced that all of the proposed changes will go ahead. You can check the details in the November video, but I'll tell you that the 27th of January will be the last day that you can take a free ride on the City Hopper, as from the 28th, there will be no more. The 28th is also the day the first set of changes to the Brisbane bus network kick in, including the start of permanent metro services on M2, but that's also covered in the November update. In just over a week, we'll also see the first stage of a transition through which the name of the bus station under King George Square will change from King George Square Station to City Hall Station. From the 28th, it will be City Hall/King George Square Station, across some customer touchpoints and the Brisbane City Council's website, with a full name change sometime in the future. Did you know that the winner of the Best International Travel Insurance for Value in Finder's 2024 Travel Insurance Awards is a local Brisbane company? Wise and Silent Travel Insurance won the 2024 Value Award because it costs less on average but covers you for more. They're also the official travel insurance provider for Australian passengers on Scoot Airlines and the sponsor of this video. Backed by a global insurance provider and a 24/7 medical assistance team, the rave reviews on Trustpilot confirm that you can travel with total peace of mind if you choose Wise and Silent for your next overseas trip. Click this QR code or the link in the video description to get an exclusive 10% discount on your premium. Next is an incident that has had state and nationwide impacts. A 13-year-old boy has been charged with attempted murder after stabbing a worker at a Coles supermarket in Numanto, Ipswich, this week. The boy took a knife that was being sold in the supermarket and stabbed 63-year-old Claudia Campomayor Watt in the back. She was transported to hospital with the knife still embedded in her back. She is now in a stable condition in PA Hospital. Attempted murder is not currently covered by the Adult Time, Adult Crime Youth Justice laws the state government recently implemented, with Premier David Crisafulli promising that there would be continued changes to the legislation over time. The Brisbane Channel does have a video examining youth crime in the works, but as it's a very complex issue and a lot of people to speak with, it will likely be a few months before that one's ready. It's not something I want to rush as it's just too important. ABC has reported that the boy that committed this crime was known to the Department of Child Safety and is understood to have complex needs. This comes as the state LNP government this week put out a release pointing to a $461 million funding black hole in the budget for the Department of Families, Seniors, Disability Services and Child Safety. They say that the funding allocation dropped by 30% from the previous year in the 2024-25 budget. The release is very light on detail, but the statement quotes Minister for Child Safety Amanda Cam as saying that they are committed to improving care for the more than 2,000 young people living in residential care across the state. The stabbing incident has led to Coles removing kitchen knives from its shelves across the country as they conduct a safety review. Woolworths did something similar in 2021 after a security guard and customer was stabbed in one of its Melbourne stores. After a risk assessment, they reintroduced them in tamper-proof packaging in some stores, while they never returned to the shelves of 350 of their stores, including 60 in Queensland. In September last year, sale of knives to people under 18 was banned in Queensland. Now, a warning, the next update may be disturbing to some people. If you're sensitive to details of child abuse, you may want to skip to the next chapter of the video. A TikTok influencer was arrested this week in Underwood for poisoning her 1-year-old daughter to get donations and expand her social media following. The 34-year-old woman allegedly poisoned her daughter using unauthorized medicines and then filmed and posted footage of the baby in immense distress and pain. The woman has been accused of raising as much as $60,000 through a GoFundMe page. GoFundMe are endeavouring to return the donations to those who were defrauded by the woman, who remains in police custody. Police say the girl and her siblings are safe. Just briefly, Domain this week has reported that the median house price in Brisbane passed the $1 million mark in the December quarter of last year. In last week's update, we saw that CoreLogic reported the median price as $890,746, but that's for both houses and units. The figure for houses was $977,575, and PropTrack's figures were different again. It's possible that Domain were looking at only Brisbane City, while the others included all 5 LGAs of Greater Brisbane, but there's not enough clarity around the data to say for sure. Domain are the least transparent as far as how they source their data, so for now all I'll say is that the price is hovering around the $1 million mark, but the Brisbane Channel really needs to do some research into how each group is sourcing their figures before pointing to who's more credible. Unfortunately, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, who are the most credible source, are not as fast to release their figures as other organisations. And while we're talking about housing, one positive update is that the state government announced this week the completion of 34 new social and affordable housing residences in Chermside. The eco-friendly housing has been designed for seniors and people with disabilities. Let's move to Olympics infrastructure updates, and public submissions to the 100-day Games Review closed on the 10th. But one submission worth mentioning was put in by a collective of local community groups against construction of a local whitewater rafting facility in Redland City. The new facility was proposed by Redland City Council in 2019 to cater to up to 8,000 spectators for the whitewater rafting slalom events. Members of the Community Alliance for Responsible Planning, or CARP, argue that the site carries cultural and environmental significance and lacks a large body of water to feed the facility, meaning that the city's water supply would need to be used. Additionally, with an existing facility left over from the Sydney Olympics still in use in Penrith, an interim report into Australia's preparedness for the 2032 Games, as well as the now failed Commonwealth Games in Victoria, suggests that Australia cannot sustain two such venues. It also points out that construction of the new facility goes against the new norm policy of utilising existing facilities even if they're in another country. Last week's update mentioned the proposal put forward by the Gold Coast Mayor for the swimming to be held there. But this week, another proposal that had made news in July or August of last year and was promptly forgotten about has been revived for the sake of a story by some media outlets. And here I am doing the same thing. Well, it is an interesting idea that's been submitted again to the current review. It's for a swimming and diving venue above the site of the quarry at Mount Coot-tha. The venue would seat 15,000 people and have breathtaking views of the city. Richard Groves, the architect behind the proposal, says the venue could become the permanent home of aquatic sports in Brisbane, but renders suggest the pool deck level could also be flipped for other events as well. In Moreton Bay City Council's submission, Mayor Peter Flannery pointed out that the original submission to host the Games was put in the hope of leveraging the event to secure better road and transport infrastructure across southeast Queensland, and that it was imperative that funding not be withheld for road and public transport upgrades. There's a lot of talk about the Games leaving a legacy. Most people think of that in terms of infrastructure, but what about cultural legacy? As calls increased to promote Australia's Indigenous history to international visitors during the Olympics, including from Dr. Liveris, president of the 2032 Olympics Organising Committee, focus has turned to long talked about plans to build an Indigenous cultural centre in South Brisbane. Since 1985, when the idea of a centre to be built in Musgrave Park was first put to the state government, there's been a lot of talk, plans, disputes, and ultimately not a lot actually happening. While Premier Crisafulli said the government was currently assessing whether a cultural centre would be a part of the state's tourism strategy, he indicated that when involving First Nations people in tourism activities, the state's priority would be on ecotourism, introducing Aboriginal culture in the natural environment. Something looking a little more likely to proceed is a proposal for a private suburban renewal project next to Alderley train station on Brisbane's north side. Seen as transitioning the area from industrial to residential, the Station Quarter complex would have 7 buildings with over 400 homes, along with retail spaces and publicly accessible open space. One notable feature is reduced car parking spaces, with residents encouraged to utilise the abundant public and active transportation options. Developers have put forward a dedicated on-site car share arrangement for cases where residents' needs aren't able to be met by public and active transport. Jumping now to the city's non-human residents, and this week Brisbane City Council announced a conservation program for platypi living in Brisbane creeks and rivers. The first stage of the project in Bullock Head Creek will involve habitat repair, weed removal, and revegetating the creeks with native species. Project planning works will begin early this year. The project is part of a broader Boost Platypus by 2032 plan, which includes other initiatives including platysigns, signage to improve awareness of platypi in creeks, platy platforms, platforms to facilitate viewing and education about platypus in waterways without disturbing the habitat, a platycam trial, live feed footage at known platypus hotspots, and platypals, support for creek neighbours and bush kindies that support platypus populations. Similar projects are being undertaken in other Brisbane LGAs, such as Ipswich. But there's another Brisbane resident that is far less welcome than the platypus. From January 18 to Australia Day on the 26th, people across southeast Queensland and all of Australia will be taking part in the Great Cane Toad Bust of 2025.
It's all so barbaric.
Actually not, Lisa. Watergum, the event organisers, are very focused on educating people about humane cane toad population control. Introduced cane toads are expanding their domain every year, and they're a serious threat to native animals for a range of reasons.
Cane toads are catastrophic for our environments, endangering native wildlife and poisoning our pets. Cane toads even impact local agriculture as they eat beneficial insects like dung beetles and bees. This has a ripple effect and impacts other plants and animals.
In 2024, the event saw a reduction in the cane toad population of over 51,000 toads at all life stages. To find out how you can participate and help control cane toad numbers, visit the WaterGum website, which is linked in the video description. Back to Greater Brisbane's human population, and Logan City Council have started using AI-enabled tracking to watch over their LGA. Utilising about 1,400 cameras, images are sent to a control room manned by council staff and police. Mayor John Raven says that the software allows police to search for license plate numbers or terms like people wearing backpacks, but says that while it can track particular items of clothing, the software doesn't identify faces. Apparently, it can even track down dumped shopping trolleys. The AI-driven surveillance system is not without its critics, with Queensland Council of Civil Liberties President Michael Cope expressing concerns that questions still exist around exactly how the data was being collected, what it was used for, and how long it would be held. Now to something a little less controversial, and South East Queensland's trains have just been given an upgraded shower facility in Normanby. It's like a regular car wash on some serious steroids. Each brush weighs a literal ton. The trains are rinsed, then acid washed and rinsed again with a demineralizing solution that leaves them sparkling. The facility can clean up to 5 trains a day. The upgrade saw the whole precinct upgraded with enhanced security and the painting of a new mural by Vans the Omega that references the local topography, along with textures and colours inspired by the local geology, flora and fauna. Of course, the Brisbane Channel would prefer a local artist had been commissioned to do the work instead of an Adelaide ring-in, but any pop of colour that brightens the city is much appreciated. In last week's update, we heard about the search for a mystery $2.1 million lottery winner in Ipswich. Well, they found her. Turns out it was a local, a Springfield woman. That's all I have for that update. This week, we learned that the University of Queensland's base facility, together with local biotechnology company Vaxas, have won a $2 million prize to accelerate development of a patch-based mRNA vaccine for COVID-19. The partnership was one of 4 concept stage winners in the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority Patch Forward Prize. That's a mouthful. Which aims to advance the commercialization of microneedle patch-based mRNA vaccines for COVID-19, seasonal influenza, and pandemic influenza. The patches have thousands of tiny micro-projections which each have a dose of the vaccine in a dehydrated form. This means the vaccines can be transported without the need for refrigeration, and unlike traditional injections, they can be self-administered. The prize will help the partnership advance the technology towards preclinical studies. The last one has come in at the last minute, but I thought it was worth including, so I've squeezed it in. This week, the Queensland Government have announced the members of their panel tasked with breathing life into the state's nightlife economy. It's chaired by former Powderfinger bass player John J.C. Collins, who owns the Triffid, one of Fortitude Valley's top live music venues. Also on the panel are other live music venue operators, event promoters, hotel and club representatives, performers, academics, charities, and Safe Night precinct workers from across the state. Brisbane's known for being more of a morning town, but the Minister for Youth, Sam O'Connor, who is responsible for the nightlife economy, says we need to get to work to ensure that our nightlife is pumping when Queensland is on the world stage in 2032. The panel is expected to meet for the first time in February, and the Brisbane Channel will be watching with interest to see what changes we can expect in the coming years. If I'm going to stay up late to document the nightlife economy, I'm going to need plenty of coffee, and you can help by buying me a coffee to say thanks for these updates. It helps support the channel so I can keep doing these updates and other videos on the channel. Or you can support the channel by becoming a member. That gets you access to extra content and a range of perks. For 2025, I aim to have between 10 and 20 discounts with local businesses available exclusively to channel members by the end of the year. Don't forget to comment with the kind of updates you'd like to see more or less of on the Brisbane Channel, and I'll see you in the next video.